Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon. Thank you for that unusual introduction with the video. I think it confirms that something that people have been telling me for years, I have the perfect face for radio. So I appreciate that. You know, let's give a warm round of applause for those who prepared our meals and the farmers that grew our food as well. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, Kentucky Farm Bureau. You know, I always have a great time coming to the annual meeting. I've been coming to this since I was a little kid. And it just confirms something everyone here already knows, that Kentucky agriculture is about family, and we're one big family. And the annual meeting is basically a family reunion, and it keeps getting popular and bigger every single year. And little to my knowledge, and maybe to Mr. Haney's surprise, that the convention's so big this year that Bernie Sanders is going to be here Friday night at the Galt House. So, Clark and Christmas Vacation had Uncle Eddie. We can have Uncle Bernie here as well. So we appreciate you extending the invitation. You know, you are part of perhaps the largest grassroots organization in the state. Not a day goes by where the Kentucky Department of Agriculture does not work hand in hand with Kentucky Farm Bureau. So I want to say thank you from the county level up to our state board, to our executive committee here, folks that I get to work with and have the honor of having mentorship with as well. You know, Kentucky agriculture could not be in a better place because we're all working together for a common cause. So thank you, Mr. Beck and Fritz and Eddie and Mr. Haney. And I also want to say a special thanks to Sam Moore as well. You served a lifetime and just rotated off the Ag Development Board. Let's give him a round of applause and say thank you for everything you've done for us as well. You know, every year, since a little kid, I got to watch the Ag Commissioner talk and address Kentucky Farm Bureau. So this is somewhat of the State of the Union address for agriculture. And as you saw this morning, we're glad to announce that farm cash receipts are expected to rise this year to $5.6 billion. That's something that we can all be proud of. It's been a robust harvest across the state. Most of our crops did very well, sometimes record yields across the counties. But our prices are still suppressed. And as Mark will tell you, in the farming community, it's one of those few occupations where you can grow yourself out of prosperity. And congratulations on a great production year. It also reflects something that we already know. Kentucky agriculture plays a dominant role in our economy, whether it's state level, local level, and even the federal level. Kentucky agriculture fights above its weight class, so to say, when it comes to economic development. A recent survey showed that 200,000 jobs in Kentucky are directly or indirectly related to agriculture. We have a $45 billion economic impact, and when you consider that our state's total gross domestic product is about $190 billion, it kind of reflects that no matter where you go in this state, agriculture plays a big role in economic development. And when we look at the national level, a recent survey came out this week that showed that 20% of the entire U.S. economy is directly or indirectly related to agriculture and food production, responsible for 43 million jobs and $1.9 trillion in wages, and has a fiscal impact of $6.7 trillion with a T across our country. And so that's something that we can all be proud of. And one reason I think that we're positioned right now with an improving agricultural outlook is that we had policymakers and leaders decades ago wisely invest half of our tobacco settlement money into the Ag Development Board. I know Warren Beeler's here and a lot of the board is here. That was probably some of the best investment that Kentucky could have made. And I think it's starting to and continues to reap benefits today, and you can see the fruits. And a lot of folks here in this room were part of that conversation. I just want to say thank you for investing in the future of agriculture. Now, at the risk of repeating myself, I'm going to have an interactive part of the speech, something I did at the ham breakfast. And I'm going to show you visually how Kentucky agriculture has changed. If you have ever worked or grown tobacco in your life, please raise your hand and take a look around. Now, if you are working or raising tobacco in 2017, keep your hand raised. You can see the difference. You can see the difference. So in the past 20 years, Kentucky has had no choice but to diversify and continue to look for new innovative ways, working closely with our research institutions to help Kentucky farmers out. I'm going to cover just 4 or 5 very brief topics for closing it up. And I just want to say it's been a busy year at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. We had a successful legislative session of really good pro-agriculture bills, including a weight variance bill for poultry, revamping the hemp program. We also wanted to make sure that you know that Kentucky Farm Bureau is in the hallways every single day pushing for the good bills, but also making sure the bad bills didn't succeed as well, which is just as important in any legislative capacity. We had a great state fair. Attendance was up quite a bit. We're about to finish up the Downtown Convention Center in August of next year. We just hired a new general manager last night. Exhibits were up at the North American, which shows you that youth participation continues to grow in livestock showing events across the state. We did have an avian influenza breakout down in western Kentucky. I want to say thank you to Dr. Stout, our collaborators, Kentucky Poultry Federation, for doing what you did to help mitigate that risk and help prevent something that could have been a lot worse for our state's largest commodity, and that is poultry. I also want to tell you that we put 8 criminals behind bars this year, working with our friends in both state and federal law enforcement, people who were stealing your credit card identity at gas pumps. And we're going to continue to be vigilant. John Cook and his crew at the Department of Agriculture will continue at zero additional cost to the taxpayer to cut down on credit card skimmers and go after those folks that are stealing credit cards across the Commonwealth. And of course, the times are tough right now. We're about to go through our 5th budget cut in 23 months at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, but we're going to do our part to tighten our belts, because I know you all have done that as well, to help our policymakers and legislators focus on the pension crisis as well. We continue our research in industrial hemp. We have 15 commercial hops growers in the state right now. We have a dozen canaf growers. We're starting to really look at different crops that Kentucky farmers can invest in. But perhaps one of the biggest accomplishments I think that we have achieved over the past 18 months is connecting farmers with existing markets. And we've got a couple examples of those. And perhaps the biggest one, as Mayor Fisher told you about bourbonism, we sat down and had a conversation with the other KDA, the Kentucky Distillers Association, and we found out that we had a lot of room to grow when it came to putting Kentucky corn into Kentucky bourbon. And we're proud to announce that by having these conversations with some of our producers, the amount of Kentucky corn going into Kentucky bourbon is up 65% than from where it was 18 months ago. So anywhere between 15 and 20 million bushels of Kentucky corn are liquefied into bourbon each and every year, and it continues to add value. It's important to realize that in Washington, D.C., we've had a lot of changes this past year. I'm proud that President Trump has put a real solid farm team into place at USDA. We have a Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, a trained veterinarian, someone who's owned agribusinesses running the USDA. He has surrounded himself by other ag commissioners from around the country, including Ted McKinney from across the river in Indiana. He's heading up the Foreign Ag Service. We have Greg Eyeball, somebody who's known from Nebraska for putting Nebraska beef in international markets. He's going to be helping out with marketing. And then Bill Northey is still waiting confirmation, running the FSA committee as well. I want to say I'm looking forward to working with Hilda Legg and Brian Lacefield in their respective roles at the USDA. And we have a great farm team to work with, including Secretary Chow and EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt as well. On international trade, we've spent a lot of time at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture talking about how dependent Kentucky agriculture already is on international trade. It's important to realize that Kentucky is not an island. We are part of the global integrated economy. We need to make sure that we strategically and surgically place ourselves when it comes to connecting our farmers with emerging markets around the world. And right now, about 5% of all the exports coming out of Kentucky are agriculture. That's about $1 billion. There's room to grow. And if you didn't know this, here are some statistics that might surprise you about how dependent we already are on trade. 1 out of every 4 rows of corn in Kentucky ends up overseas. Half of our soybeans end up overseas. 80% of the tobacco that we still grow in this state ends up overseas. So it's important to realize that if we want to help boost commodity prices, we not only need to grow the domestic market, but also look for opportunities abroad as well. That's why I'm proud to announce that about 5 weeks ago, I was with the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association in Beijing, China, to announce a major trade agreement that had been reached between the U.S. and the People's Republic of China. Up until 5 weeks ago, you could not export a live horse into China. But due to the work of the KDA, the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association, our embassy staff, and those great folks at USDA, we signed a trade protocol. And so on the invitation of Ambassador Branstad, went to Beijing, and we're proud to announce that the thoroughbred, quarter horse, and saddlebred, and all horses for that matter, are now legal to export to China. And that's a growing opportunity. And I know there may not be a lot of horsemen and women in the audience today, but that also helps support those raising forages, producing the feed as well. And we hope this opens the door for other trade opportunities in China, which right now is a $200 million opportunity when it comes to exporting horses outside of the U.S. We're also engaged in NAFTA. I know there's a lot of concern right now, the role agriculture will play, but we have sent delegations and we have been participating with those conversations to make sure that we first do no harm when it comes to agricultural trade. And as the Trump administration continues to look out and prospect with bilateral agreements with other countries, we want to make sure that American agriculture comes first in international trade. We know that Kentucky needs international trade, but better yet, due to our great agricultural products known around the world, the rest of the world needs Kentucky agriculture. Because we're known for our horses, we're known for our bourbon, and Colonel Sanders is the best ambassador Kentucky's ever had around the world because people know who we are. Speaking of Kentucky Proud, it continues to grow. We have 6,000 members right now, and we're this close, working with Dave Maples and some folks in the cattle industry, to debut a Kentucky Proud beef product in the Kroger. And I think, it's my opinion, that if a Kentucky consumer goes to the grocery store and they're presenting a 1-pound package of ground beef of unknown origin versus one that we know that was bred, fed, processed, and was Kentucky Proud, supports a Kentucky farmer, and puts that nice Kentucky Proud logo on it, the Kentuckian is going to buy Kentucky Proud, and they might even pay a premium for it. So we're going to continue to use that powerful marketing example to help grow Kentucky's economy. It's important that we continue to have a conversation about rural infrastructure. We have Secretary Elaine Chao actively promoting the need for infrastructure investments in rural America. It's so important that we can move our commodities and livestock from farm to market, not only on our highways and byways, but also our waterways. I've worked with the Kentucky officials, but also with a recent meeting with the new Army Corps of Engineers Colonel Gant, to talk about the importance of keeping the Ohio River open for business. I know that's affected basis for a lot of people right now, but we're going to continue to push that. And speaking of the federal level, we're also working with our friends in Washington, D.C. to deal with that issue with dark fire tobacco and Triple N. We hope to have a resolution for you soon. We're evaluating the need for ELDs on our trucking industry as well. And of course, we're starting a conversation, and have had a robust conversation about the 2018 Farm Bill as well. And I want to say thank you to Kentucky Farm Bureau and to you for helping lead that conversation across our state to make sure that we are as best prepared as possible for the 2018 Farm Bill. And we will have influence. Given the strength of our federal congressional delegation, Kentucky will have influence, and Mr. Henney actually already testified for the U.S. Senate Ag Committee. So it's important to realize that your voice will be heard in Washington, D.C. And in closing, my last subject, we talked about this last year. It's the holiday season. As a farmer, as a farm kid, and I grew up in a community and a family that was generous to others. That we're blessed in Kentucky, and as the Ag Commissioner, I am fortunate to represent an industry that is blessed with an abundance of food. We are very good at what we do in Kentucky. We're great at raising crops and raising livestock. But it is an unfortunate reality that 1 in 6 Kentuckians and 1 in 5 Kentucky school children suffer from food insecurity. And over the past year, we did something about it. We found out that there was a need for better communication. So we've been talking with others across the state about communicating more. We found out that some grocery stores, instead of donating food, we're throwing it into a dumpster, fearful of lawsuits. And so with the help of the General Assembly, we passed a bill unanimously that now takes the liability away from those who donate food, and also helps ease the liability for farmers who allow volunteers on their farm to harvest crops that would otherwise rot in the field. We also found out that there was a lack of cold storage freezers at our food pantries. In fact, I met several food pantry directors who had to refuse donations of Kentucky Proud beef and protein and eggs and milk because they simply didn't have a freezer to put it in. And we're happy that Farm Credit of Mid-America and CoBank stepped up to the plate and donated 156 chest freezers, including one that's probably in your county right now, to help out with food insecurity. We're having a similar conversation with Walmart right now, and I want to say thank you to our dairy folks, the Poultry Federation, the Kentucky pork producers for their donations across the year as well. Now, if you were to ask me what the 2 biggest issues in American agriculture are today, number 1 would be inconsistent farm income. It's tough, and it's frustrating, especially during a year of such great harvest and robust yields. But the second biggest issue is that people simply don't know or misunderstand what we do in agriculture. I'm going to challenge you here today that when you go home after the holiday season, take time to get involved in your school system. If you haven't done so already, perhaps team up with local extension office, NRCS, FSA, your Farm Bureau chapter to help sponsor an Ag Adventure Day. Get the young kids involved. Let's prove the statistics wrong, that right now 16 million Americans think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. 40% of American school children don't know that cheese is a dairy product. Another 40% don't know that a hamburger is a beef product. We can do a better job by telling our story. So with that said, I want to say thank you. Thank you, Kentucky Farm Bureau. I wish you all a great annual meeting. If we can be of any help to you at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'll be here for the rest of today. And if you like to buy Kentucky proud. If you like to eat like I do, thank a Kentucky farmer, which means today I want to say thank you for another wonderful year. Thank you very much.